You know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And joining us today is Colleen Cowie from the blog and podcast Pass the Mic. How are you tonight, Colleen?
Hi, I'm doing well. Just hanging out and excited to be chatting on the podcast.
Awesome. And thank you for doing the show.
Of course.
For those who are unfamiliar with Pass the Mic, why don't you tell people what the show's about and what your site's about?
Yeah, for sure. So Pass the Mic is a blog that I founded in 2018. It is dedicated to amplifying the voices of female, trans, and non-binary musicians and music industry people. So it's something that I started just as a project for a class, actually, and kept doing because I love it. It's definitely inspired by my experience working in girls' rock camps. And I started it also just out of my frustration about representation of non-men in the media. It's something that has obviously gone on for a really long time. And right now there are a lot of really other great media outlets that focus on lifting up the voices of non-men. Like She Shreds has been one of my favorite magazines, super inspired by them, or even smaller blogs like The Grey Estates. So those were some of the things I was thinking about when I started it. So that's kind of what I like to do on my site, is just focus on people that are doing really cool things in music, whether that's musicians or audio engineers or photographers. I also started a podcast for Pass the Mic this fall. So my first episode came out in September of 2019. And so there I'll just chat with different musicians or music industry people. And yeah, those are pretty informal, just like conversations. So that's kind of a big overall gist of the stuff that Pass the Mic does.
Yeah, it's a really cool show. I was just listening this week to your episode you did with Termination Dust.
Mm-hmm.
And they just put out a really great album this year. And it was a really fun conversation that you had with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you've talked to a few other people that I really like the Grey Estates creator, Lauren. Her side's so cool. I love the Grey Estates.
She's so great.
Like, that's where I find probably 50% of the new music that I listen to. Like, it's just through that site.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Lauren and the Grey Estates have turned me on to so many great bands. And yeah, I'm always surprised when I look at that site and I see bands that I've never heard of. And then I listen to them and I'm like, why haven't I heard of this band before? It's like exactly the kind of stuff that I love. So yeah, I love finding new music through the Grey Estates because I do it all the time.
Yeah, and it's always like this really well recorded, like kind of polished, like you'd think that they would have already been bigger based on like how good the music is on that site. And it's just, It's funny. It feels like she's kind of discovering them, even though, I'm sure a lot of it's PR people reaching out to her, but.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, that's one of the things that's like blown my mind in the time that I've started a music blog, is just like, which maybe this sounds a little naive, but just realizing like how much great music is out there and how many people are just like doing it and recording in great studios and putting out really high quality work, and I've never heard of them. Like that still overwhelms me all the time because I'm like, how do I can't discover everything that's out there, but it's crazy.
Yeah, I never want to be that person who like stops trying to find new music and never, and just like settles on what they've been listening to since they were a teenager. Like I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to. So yeah, It's really great that your site and Grey Estates and what the alternative and Angry Girl music, like all that stuff exists because that's totally right up my alley with like the kind of music I love. So.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, I just saw that you did an episode too with Amanda from Angry Girl Music.
Yeah, it's such a good episode. She's so good at her podcast, and she was so fun to talk to, and Yeah, I really love that episode.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Well, I guess we could get into the show then, if everyone is ready.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ooh. So, this is the show where we use a number generator and the Rate Your Music punk charts to discuss one album and one EP from the same year. And this week we are talking about the year 2015. Or 2015. Which says weird way to say that. But so we'll take a look at what else has come out that year. So taking a look at the Rate Your Music charts, is there anything on here that jumps out at you as far as, hey, that's a really good record?
Let's see. Flipping through it right now. Jeff Rosenstock is at number 1, and he is someone who I have heard just countless numbers of people gush over, and I've never really gotten in to Jeff Rosenstock. But maybe 2020 is the year for me. I feel like it's well overdue.
I'm glad you said that, because we have said that numerous times on the show. And I always feel bad about saying that, too, because he's so well respected. And
he seems like genuinely like very nice and thoughtful and like encouraging musician. It's just not for me.
Yeah, I think I like everything about Jeff Rosenstock except for his actual music.
Yeah, that makes me so sad when that happens, because I'm like, I want to like this person so much, but just something doesn't click.
Yeah. Let's see. This is a weird list. I mean, I used to say that all the time, but there's some more indie artists on here than I expected.
Yeah. One record I do, just off the first page, I do want to specifically mention is Imaginary Life by Warriors. That's a fantastic record, and I really, really enjoyed that one when it came out. So I'm happy to see that it is generally well regarded. I am super looking forward to their new record, though, because all the singles I've heard from it are fantastic. Other than that, I don't know. I feel like I paid more attention to this year, but I'm not recognizing a whole lot.
Yeah, I feel like there's some names that I know, but all in all, I'm like, yeah, it seems like kind of a random mix. Where I'm like, nothing's really like grabbing me of like, yes, I remember listening to that in 2015.
Yeah, there are a lot of bands on here that it's like their later work became more well known, like Proto Martyr and Ought and The Armed. But yeah, and Algiers. It's just interesting list.
I mean, records I do remember. The first Beach Slang album.
Yeah.
This was also the year of Nonstop Feeling by Turnstile, which was a big deal. Again, another record I didn't really get into, but I did listen to it that year when it came out. Mabel by Spraynard came out.
Yeah, that was the comeback Spraynard record. Wasn't quite as fun as Untitled, but solid record. I'm trying to remember what I was listening to in 2015.
Yeah, I was trying to go back right before this. That just occurred to me of, I should go and try to remember what I was actually listening to in 2015. And I remembered that 2015 was the first year that I started hosting a radio show on my college's radio station, WMCN. Shout out to them because they're amazing. And I started a show, which was also kind of one of the inspirations for starting Past the Mic, which was called, I'm like a little bit embarrassed about it right now, but it was called Radio Girl, like GRRL, like Riot Girl. Because I also played music by women and non-binary folks on it. So I was trying to go back. I think I have some of my playlists from that radio show saved to my computer, but I feel like it was a bunch of just like Mitski and Chastity Belt, and I mean all of the stuff that I still listen to this day, but like a very specific brand of like indie rock circa the 2010s.
Yeah, I remember we did a sort of a retrospective on the decade, and I think this is around the era where we started to like kind of not find as much that was really memorable or stand out like years later. I feel like the middle part of the decade kind of like fell off as far as like the amount of high quality records that came out that like really stuck with me, but unlike the earlier part or even in the last year or two.
2015 was still, I think, a better year than maybe we're seeing based on these charts, because a little further back I'm seeing more stuff. I mean, there was a Blacklisted record that I know I listened to a lot. Then Shame by Petal came out that year.
I love that record.
There's a Winter Break record that was great, and the Last Coliseum record. So there was definitely stuff that stuck, but it's not necessarily represented by the tastes of our increasingly frustratingly limited database. It's one of the War on Women record came out in 2015. See, I don't know. There's interesting stuff if you dig, though.
Yeah, I guess that's always the case, though. I guess.
I mean, and that's definitely always true of just the last decade, especially. Anytime we've looked at the charts and talked about what came out those years, there's good stuff all the way to the last page. So it's just kind of that accessibility. I mean, kind of what we were talking about as far as like, you know, great sounding records by bands that you've never heard of. I mean, there's just so much music that gets put out every year now at this point. And
yeah, totally. It's pretty overwhelming scrolling through. I'm just scrolling through like the pages and pages of this list right now and being like, these albums, there's probably a lot of great stuff on here that I've never heard of, which is crazy and overwhelming. I'm just seeing that at number 152, there's an album by Waves, which I remember listening to. That is one that I remember listening to a lot in 2015. I feel like that's one that I had on repeat throughout the 2010s and would listen to all the time. But there's also a lot of stuff that I've never heard of, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and because we use like the punk tag specifically for these charts, it kind of like filters out a lot of stuff that we would also be interested in as well, and then also brings in a bunch of stuff that we're not interested in. Like, I don't care about most grindcore bands, so I'd rather know more about the indie artists that have more punk and DIY tendencies than a totally DIY grind band.
Yeah, it's tricky to think about the genre with this too. That's another thing that I was thinking about when I was looking at the list of albums that you sent me, is just like, how do you define punk? And looking at like all of the different genres and sounds that popped up on some of these albums, I'm like, would I call that punk? Would I call this other one punk? Like, what does that even mean? Because there's just such a wide range.
Well, that kind of segues perfectly into our album if we're ready to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, we got number 2 on the album charts, and it is Chelsea Wolfe and her album Abyss. going to run through a couple of basics of the record first. Chelsea Wolfe is a singer-songwriter from Sacramento, California. This is her 4th studio album and was released on August 7th, 2015 on Sargent House Records. And the personnel on this record is Chelsea Wolfe, Ezra Buchla, Ben Chisholm, and Dylan Fujioka. I'd list all of their instruments, but it looks like everyone plays almost everything on this record. So there are a couple guest appearances as well, one by Mike Sullivan of Russian Circles, as well as D.H. Phillips of True Widow. And the album was produced by John Congleton at Elmwood Recording, and Congleton has produced records by the Polyphonic Spree, St. Vincent, the Decemberists, so kind of a big-name producer there. And Sargent House has released albums by Russian Circles, Boris, Mutoid Man, Earth, and a ton of other like critically acclaimed metal-adjacent bands. So
Right.
now,
Brown Pants Metal.
yeah, Brown Pants Metal. So we may all be in agreement here, but this really isn't a punk record, right?
I would not call it one. I think it's very hard to define. There's like doom metal, there's like soft singer-songwriter. Like I still don't know what to call it, but I would have a hard time calling it punk.
Yeah, I had always associated her with more metal acts, and that makes sense because like she toured with more metal bands, and like she's played with members of Converge and like Neurosis. Like so, it's odd to see her on this list. I think it's because gothic rock is considered a subgenre of punk. It's like a branch off of post-punk, but I don't know. Goth it's so far different from the rest of the punk sound. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like when I think about like, you know, basic characteristics that define punk, I'm like, okay, generally like fast tempo, loud, upbeat, and like this album, it's loud in some parts definitely, but like it's so slow and haunting and just kind of like dragged out in some points, which is not what I would consider.
Yeah, it's got a lot of like there's folky elements, there's ambient stuff, post rock. Yeah, this is one of those weird like casualties of being in a user, a database with information compiled by users. So, what, Dylan? I'll let you start this off. What did you think of this record?
Well, I've been told to check out Chelsea Wolfe probably since this record came out, and I've only just now done it. So that shows kind of my interest level. It's funny calling it. It's labeled on Rate Your Music as gothic rock and dark wave, and even both of those two terms are almost too limited. This is kind of one of those records where you could probably appropriately individually tag the songs, for what genre they are. I mean, gothic rock, I guess, is a pretty broad term, but personally, it's not really my cup of tea. But there are interesting moments and interesting tones. I think her voice sounds really good, and she definitely has a natural sense for good haunting melodies. But I feel like the way the whole record comes together, and it doesn't feel like a band at all, which I feel like is a very kind of like basic expectation when we're talking about punk. So I feel like that's another thing that kind of puts it a lot further outside of our usual wheelhouse. It's more of a producer record. That's kind of the thought that I had. And when you mentioned the producer and what he worked on, that made a lot of sense.
Colleen, what did you think of it?
I did not expect to like this album as much as I did. When I looked at the list that you sent me, I immediately gravitated towards Petal because, that's a band that I love and I know well. And I was like, oh, that's an easy choice. I'll probably go with Shame by Petal. But then I was like, no, I'll, take a second and listen to all of them and make an informed decision. And I'm glad that I did because I hadn't really listened to much Chelsea Wolfe at all before this. And I'm really glad that I did because of this. Because, I feel like I also associated her a lot with metal. which is just in general not a genre that I listen to very much. But I feel like this album really made me expand what I think of as metal, which I think this is also like a particular case and one very specific viewpoint of, you know, that genre, and also weaves in a lot of other influences, like her more singer-songwriter stuff, and more kind of like arty influences as well. But yeah, I thought it was really a really beautiful and haunting album. And then the more that I started to read about it, and after I learned that it was inspired by Chelsea Wolfe's experiences with sleep paralysis, I just, felt like I really got like a visual, auditory, like all of my senses were engaged, and like, it just painted a really like vivid picture and like let me into her own little world, which I really enjoyed.
I'm glad that you enjoyed this quite a bit, and Dylan, you seem to be more on the negative side, so I may fall in the middle here, which is interesting that it kind of worked out that way. This is one of those records that I really enjoy a lot about it. I like her voice a lot. I like the instrumentation. Like the first two tracks are outstanding, I think. Kind of reminds me of some almost like score for like film, like, you know, more like science fiction, thriller, horror, like kind of darker movies, something like Annihilation, like. And then like her voice is amazing. My biggest drawback is just the length of the songs, like, and it's not that the length of the songs doesn't fit. Like, these songs should be this long, but at the same time, I get a little impatient when I'm listening to music this slow and this drawn out, despite it doing its job exactly the way it's intending to. I'm in this weird spot of fully recognizing that it is very, very good and not necessarily enjoying listening to the record, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like very conceptual. Like, I mean, I guess we kind of talked about this before too, kind of like knowing that, oh, I think I could like this, you know, artist or this song, but then not really enjoying the experience of listening to it. And I think this one, like, that is one of the things that I really liked about this album, is how it's kind of like this big metaphor for sleep paralysis, or also using that as a metaphor for other things, which I think she achieves really well on this album. But also it is kind of like a heady, arty, conceptual album, which kind of, you know, it's not easy listening. It can make it harder to get into it.
Yeah, it's definitely not a car album.
No.
Yeah, it's not, like I tried to listen to it running errands kind of music, which, you know, there is something to be said about that. I mean, I do want to lend it that credit that I didn't listen to it in the way that the artist definitely would have intended. I'm sure that unless it was like a long car ride, she would prefer that I, you know, could devote more consistent, uninterrupted time to it. Just this was one of those records that didn't really make it into my listening at a time when I could do that. So just had to work with what I could. But that being said, there were some really, really strong songs. I thought that, let me see, I have to find the actual titles. Well, like Justin said, Carrion Flowers and Iron Moon, the first couple of songs were really strong. Maw, I thought was an especially effective kind of dirge. And there was one other song, and I can't think of the name of it now, that I thought branched out more in terms of like the sonic palette. It almost had a slightly happier tonality and some interesting synth work towards the end that I thought was cool. But yeah, I don't know. This one just isn't for me, I think.
I was looking at her background, and her father was apparently like a country musician. I don't know that he had like anything recorded, but he played in country bands when she was a kid, and she was like self-recorded a lot of stuff as a kid on like a little Casio keyboard, and so she grew up around music, and then she is also inspired by like R&B. So at the very same time, like while this, like she says, Aaliyah is one of her like biggest musical influences.
Oh wow, I would not have guessed that.
No, and knowing those two facts about her made me want to hear her do a country album and do like a straight up like pop album, because I would be very interested to hear what she came up with and like her take on those more traditional sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Like like I said, I really respect this album, and it's definitely like capital A art for me. Like it's legit smart music, but at the same time, yeah, it's not hangout music. It's more just like sit and listen and try and capture like the concepts of what she's singing about. And
mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I agree that she has a gorgeous voice, which really carries a lot of the songs on this album. So I think that would be so interesting to hear her do like a pop album or a country album and hear what that voice sounds like in a different context.
It's supposedly her last album that came out last year, actually. It's tagged Gothic Country, so maybe she does bring out some of those influences a little later on, but I'd be curious to hear those. I would be more interested to hear her apply some of those pop sensibilities, even to the the instrumentation and the orchestra, the arrangement and tonality of this record. I think that they could mesh really well. So I guess I might give her later stuff a listen as well. But
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of production on this album, which I think serves it well, but yeah, it's easy to kind of get distracted because there are just so many different dynamic changes and changes in instrumentation and just so many things that are going on all at the same time that it's hard to, hear that all stripped away and really get at the heart of like what Chelsea Wolfe's songwriting is like.
Yeah, the record's 55 minutes long, and like that's a long record. Most of the ones we talk about on here don't hit the 40-minute point for the most part. And then there's even like an extended version on Spotify. Did either of you listen to that version?
No, I did not.
No, I didn't either. It was hard for me to carve out enough time to listen to this record multiple times this week. Like I got through it all the way through it twice, and then like a couple other like just samplings here and there. And I would kind of like, if I got up and started doing something around the house, then I would wind up like missing whole songs almost. So it's lengthy and it demands your attention in a way that's more challenging than the average record we talk about.
Definitely.
At least on this show.
Yeah, I wrote down a lot of notes when I was listening to this album, which is often how I like to listen to albums anyway, if I know that I'm going to talk or write about them, just because I like feel a very strong need as a person to like be very organized all the time. But I also feel like, yeah, there was just so much to pay attention to at once that I was like, I need to map this out and like write out all of the things that are going on at once so I don't lose it all.
On a scale of 1 to 5, what would you give this? Dylan, you go first.
I would give it a 3. And just like I said, it's ultimately it's just not for me. I don't think that it's bad in really any prominent ways. Like I never wanted to skip a track, but I definitely stopped paying attention to more than a few tracks. So it's just kind of right down the middle for me.
What do you think, Colleen?
I'm going to give it 2 different numbers in terms of concept. I'm going to give it a 4.5 for concept, because I feel like the like ideas behind it and the metaphors in it and just all the ways that like these individual sounds like recreated an experience or a feeling, like when she's, you know, describing, like her lyrics are talking about sleep paralysis and maybe feeling like falling or trapped in the dark, and then there's like these kind of atmospheric sounds that, you know, recreate the sound of you falling, or these whooshing like wind sounds. I think I give it a 4.5. Great concept, a lot of fun to listen to. But in terms of like listenability, or like you were saying, like, you know, would I just put this on and like go about my day? Like a 3. You know, I would make time for it, but it's not something I'm going to put on all the time.
Yeah, I like that you broke it down like that, because my initial idea was to give it a 4 to kind of do that and like meet it in the middle as far as its creativity and its artistic side versus like its actual just listenability and enjoyability. So like I was going to stick it right in a 4, but you're right, like a 3 on listenability and then almost a 5 on just pure artistic merit. So yeah, it's an interesting record. When we sent you the list, we kind of didn't expect you to choose this one.
We threw it on there because it was like, well, that's a big name. Like,
yeah, and like personally, I hadn't really dove into her music either. So like I was interested in experiencing some of her music just to see what she was really all about, and I thought maybe you wouldn't actually choose her, but it's funny that you did.
Yeah, I mean, I did not expect to choose her either. So, but I'm glad that you put it on there for that reason.
Yeah, and I'm glad I listened to it, because I do think she's going to be an artist that I maybe not listen to her regularly, but anytime she puts something new out, I may give it a listen just to see what she's doing. Because, yeah, there's a lot here. It's very dense.
Yeah. Definitely. There's a lot to sift through. I feel like this is, making me want to pay more attention to her more recent work too. Because, like I said, I haven't delved into her music that much. But now I'm curious to see what else she has. So.
Yeah, there are a lot of albums listed. Like, this is her only her 4th studio album, but she has a lot of other things that I believe are self-recorded, or they're like remixes, or acoustic songs. Like, there's lots of different things on her in her discography. So I'm curious. I wonder if she's one of those artists that'll be, if I gave everything a shot, I would wind up listening to some weird side offshoot thing she did more than like her main music. But well, we can move into our EP if everyone's ready.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on the EP chart, we got number 107. And it is Football, Etc. with their 2008 EP, Disappear. Football, etc. are from Houston, Texas. And did I say 2008 EP? We're doing
Don't
2015. It's 2015 is the year this came out. 2008 is the year they formed. The number 2008 was right underneath the title of the album. That's why I said that. This was released on Count Your Lucky Stars, as well as strictly no capital letters in Europe. And it was released between their 2013 album Audible and their 2017 album Corner. And the personnel on this record is Lindsay Minton on guitar and vocals, Mercy Harper on bass, and Daniel Hawkins on drums. And the record was recorded by Jay Robbins at the Magpie Cage. Is this 2 weeks in a row where we had a Jay Robbins record? Yeah. Colleen, what did you think of this EP?
I had not listened to this full EP before listening to it for this podcast, but listening to it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the exact kind of thing that I would love to write about for Pass the Mic. I was like, if you had told me that this came out last week, I would be like, great, I'm going to write about it right now. Because, yeah, I feel like it's that total vein of like new Midwest emo, kind of like sad lyrics, but really like melodically beautiful songwriting, kind of guitar heavy, but also has these gorgeous strings on a lot of songs. So I was just like, sign me up. This is totally the kind of stuff that I go for, and I'm here for it.
Dylan, what do you think?
I liked this one. I don't think it's their best material, but it's just an EP, so that's somewhat to be expected. Football, etc. Football, etc. is a band that I've always been interested in and never really spent a lot of time with, because I don't know that I've listened to any of their full lengths other than The Draft. But they're one of those bands that, like, I've seen them at Fest. They were great. And every time I've heard them, I've enjoyed them. So this EP, while it's maybe not their strongest material that I've heard, I think it is at least a really good motivator for me to really give Football, etc. a more exhaustive listen. But it's kind of interesting. I feel like this is for the sound of Midwest emo that they were doing. I don't know. You said Count Your Lucky Stars, and I would have expected this. In 2015, I would have thought this was probably a different label. That's interesting.
Yeah, Count Your Lucky Stars in 2015 had also put out Empire and Dowsing Records. So I didn't realize
that would have been the very last Empire release.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were still kind of that active in 2015. I thought they had already kind of toned down at that point, but they were still, it looks like they were still pretty active till 2016. So, yeah, Football, etc. are one of those Midwestern emo revival groups from the earlier part of this decade that didn't quite get as much attention as most of the other, like Us Knowing or Grown Ups or one of those Kinsella style bands, or even Empire got a lot more attention than Football, etc. But I feel like there's a little bit of a stronger songwriting to their music. I really enjoyed this EP. I think the two songs with the strings on them are like outstanding. Like those are the strongest tracks on the record. Sweep and Open. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This style of Midwestern, I guess it's the Mineral sort of. Who else does that sound? It's not like the Kinsella American football style.
Well, it's more like Braid, and it's more upbeat, and it's not as mopey.
I can't
Yeah, definitely mopey lyrics, but I feel like the songwriting and the instrumentals like bring it up a notch, which is like I love that contrast too with it, where like if you just sit there and like really focus on the lyrics, it's very sad stuff, but like the way that they bring it together and like weave it in with the instrumentals is like adds another color to it.
Yeah. Were you familiar with Football Etc. before this episode?
I had heard the name before, but I don't think I'd ever listened to their stuff before. And so, yeah, but listening to it, I was like, oh, I like hear the kind of stuff that this fits in. Like it sounded familiar, even though I don't think I'd heard anything by them before. So I'm really glad that this episode introduced me to them as well.
Yeah, like Dylan mentioned, we saw them at Fest. Did we see them 2 years in a row?
Did we watch them too?
They all
like
lived together.
Maybe only one time, but yeah, I mean they've been a band that has been on my list of bands to see at Fest every single year that they've played. So
yeah, yeah, they haven't really released anything since 2017, and I don't know if they have broken up or not. Both Mercy and Lindsay are in another band currently called Overo, who just put out an album last year, which is a really great record as well. So I'm wondering if they've moved on from this, or if it's just kind of on hold, or they're waiting for the right inspiration. But they're really great duo as far as their guitar and bass together, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like this one is very, very different vibe from the Chelsea Wolfe album. And a good one that you can just put on in your day and listen to it while you're getting ready or running errands. And kind of, every time I would listen to these songs, I focus on something different, because even though they're a trio and at times it's kind of a more stripped back instrumentation, there are parts that are more, kind of bigger with the strings. So I feel like every time I listened to it, I kind of took away something different, which was really fun.
Yeah, I think this is the only time they've really... I mean, I can't say for sure if this is the only time they've played with strings, but I don't recall ever hearing strings on anything else they did before. I'm wondering... I get a really strong J. Robbins influence on this, especially on the last track, Open. It had a very Jawbox sound to some of the chord structures. And then with the use of strings, J. Robbins used strings in Opposite Future Plans, I believe, and maybe in some of his solo work. So you can hear his influence on this EP, and I was surprised that it was only an EP. I don't think he did the full length after this one, so I'm guessing this is just a little thing they wanted to work with him, and maybe it was just that's the only thing they had ready around that time. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, he did the follow-up album as well. Okay, so he did Corner, which was their last record. I should go back to that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is making me want to check out more Football, etc. too, which is good, because I feel like I kind of get into a cycle, always trying to focus on new music and what's coming out and what's come out in the past week. And, if something's come out more than like a month ago, I don't have time to listen to it because that makes it old. And like I've got to focus on what's new and what's coming out. So I really liked, just like doing this in general and focusing on a specific year. I'm like, I need to do this more often and like kind of get out of my little bubble of like new music. Cause it's good to like have that perspective and be like, oh yeah, here's this band that I've never really heard of before. And I really enjoy their music and want to listen to more of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea of this show, or at least part of the reason why I wanted to start this show. One, I just wanted to start a podcast, but two, I really wanted to
primarily fueled by ego.
Yeah, that's right.
Not a bad reason.
Bow before my superior taste in music. No, I really wanted to dive into older records that I hadn't listened to. Like it was a way to like make myself listen to stuff I hadn't listened to before. So, because I do the same thing where I focus primarily on just newer music. I'd say most of the week I'm listening to stuff that's come out within the last year. So I keep like a running list of albums that came out as the year goes along, and most of my decisions when it comes to what I'm going to listen to is based on like that list. So this show kind of helps me like really look into older records that I hadn't listened to in a while or ever listened to before. But yeah, I really like doing this. As you can tell, we've done this show for almost 2 years now. So
Yeah, it's fun. Even with an album or with a year like 2015, I'm like, oh yeah, I know it came out in 2015. That's not that long ago. And then actually looking at the list, I'm like, wow, there's a lot that I don't know, and there's so much more to discover.
yeah. On a scale of 1 to 5 or 0 to 5, what would you give this one, Dylan?
I would give this a 4. Really enjoyable and something that I'll come back to.
Yeah, I'll give it a 4 too. That's right where I'm at. I really do want to, like, even right now, talking about this record, I want to listen to those 2 songs with the strings on them a lot. What do you think, Colleen?
Yeah, I think I'm going to copy both of you and also say a 4. I enjoyed listening to this one a lot, and it's making me want to dig into more from Football, etc.
Yeah, I highly recommend their album, The Draft. It's kind of the one that started their attention. It's funny. All of their name is Football, etc., and then like the name of their albums are The Draft and Audible and Corner. And the first EP is called First Down. So it's like it's all football titled things. But
that's cute.
I don't think any of the lyrics are remotely about, which would be silly to actually have songs about football, I guess. But
just kind of like read out a play, you know.
I guess it's a play on American football.
That makes sense.
And that is where the whole sports reference thing.
Yeah. Well, there are lots of
referencing sports.
Yeah, there's the band Sports. There's Remember Sports. There's
That's true.
Tennis. Yeah, there's a lot of bands with sports names. There's Quarterbacks. They're a good Philly band. Okay, we have a question that we wrap up our show with now that we've done maybe for 5 episodes at this point. So, you are in a time machine and you are going back to the year 2015. It's so long ago. And you have to see one of these artists. So you have to see either Chelsea Wolfe or Football, etc. live. Which one would you pick, Colleen?
I would pick Chelsea Wolfe because I'm very curious to hear how she recreates her songs in a live setting. I've never seen her before, and just listening to the album Abyss, there are so many huge soundscapes on them. There's synths, there's really crunchy guitars, there's acoustic guitar, there are just so many sounds, and I'm really curious to hear what that would be like in a live setting and how she would do things differently or keep them really similar, and also if she would add like what the performance would be like as well, because I feel like listening to this one album, at least, it was also kind of a visual experience in the way that the lyrics were really evocative and these soundscapes kind of like painted these pictures in my brain when I was listening to it. So I'm very curious to see how that would translate to a live show and also hear more of her music and what that whole set would look like.
Cool. Dylan, what do you think?
Even though I've seen them before, I think I still want to go see Football, etc. I just think I'd enjoy it more overall. I remember watching Football, etc. at Fest and being really inspired by Mercy Harper's bass choice. She plays a shell pink Fender 6, which is a 6-string bass, and it just looks so cool. And I love that pink, shell pink color. If I could afford one, I'd buy one. And I'm not even a regular bass player, so.
I think I would go see Chelsea Wolfe as well. I want to see what that looks like live, that performance. I feel like it's going to be more theatrical. Between the two, it's going to be much more theatrical. Not to say anything about Football, etc., but I know what an emo band looks like when they play. So I don't know what Chelsea Wolfe is like live, and I would be very interested to see what she does. I wonder if there's any visual element to the show that would be represented. I do very much enjoy Football, etc. I'd probably have more fun at the end, but I don't know. I would like. I want to experience Chelsea Wolfe, especially at this point in 2015. This was her biggest album to date, and I think it's still her most critically acclaimed. So, yeah, I think that's where I'd go. But I guess that'll do it for this week's episode. Colleen, why don't you tell everyone where they can find your site, your music, where to follow you, or your music, your podcast, or where we can follow you online.
Yeah, for sure. So Pass the Mic, our website is pass-the-mic.com, so you can find everything there. We're also on Twitter at Pass the Mic Mag, just MAG for like magazine. And then we're also on Facebook. Right now that's it for social media, but you can also find the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Podbean.
Very awesome. And we'll link all that in the show notes. Yeah, there's a lot of other Pass the Mics on if you just Google Pass the Mic.
Yeah, I think when I was like looking up the domain name for the podcast, there's like a Christian, like evangelical podcast called Pass the Mic. So if you find that, that's not what we are, but you could have to check that one out too.
Yeah. And that'll do it for us. You can follow us online. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at punklautopod. Our website is punklautopod.simplecast.fm. We have a voicemail. We haven't gotten any voicemails in a while. It is 202-688-PUNK. So call us and leave us a voicemail and tell us what you thought about these records. Is Chelsea Wolfe punk, or are we crazy to even be spotlighting her? But that'll do it for this week then.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.